I guess I'll start by welcoming everybody to our Museum After Hours for October. Today we're joined by Sherilyn Jacobson. She is a docent and an all-around super volunteer at the museum. And she's going to take us on a walk around the Fort Walla Walla Cemetery. And that's actually right across the way from the museum's Pioneer Village. And unfortunately, we had to cut the Weston Cemetery tour with Charles due to some technical issues. So we're just going to focus on the tour of the Fort Cemetery. So I'm just going to play that video first, and then Sherilyn will join again after the video for a Q&A. Sound good?
I got started working on this 6 years ago when my husband and I moved back here to Walla Walla to retire. And our very first project that we worked on here, even before we became docents at the museum, was to clean the tombstones. And we got some very good guidance from the local monument company. They told us the product to use and how to use it, and we went through and cleaned every tombstone here. Since then, some fellow ROA members and some members of one of the local Lions clubs, we have come in here and cleaned a second time. So that's why they look pretty good. From that, we joined the committee that was doing fundraising to build the World War II monument, which is up on the hill. And we got started doing research on those casualties, because that monument actually serves two purposes. It is to honor the approximately 3,800 men and women from the county who served, and there were 93 who didn't make it back. So we have written a book about them. We did some research on their biographical information, and then also about the unit in which they served and what was happening to that unit at the time that they were killed in battle. The fort's soldiers were involved in several fierce conflicts, including the Battle of Frenchtown, the Battle of Steptoe Butte, the Battle of Whitebird Canyon, the Battle of Cottonwood Canyon, and the Colonel Wright expedition. Soldiers from these battles and other fort personnel are buried here. 22 different units were stationed at the fort until 1910, making it the longest continually occupied fort in the Northwest. These included dragoon, infantry, artillery, and cavalry units. A troop of Indian soldiers were stationed at the fort from 1891 to 1893. Also, some Buffalo soldiers from the 9th Cavalry were here from 1902 to 1904. The first burial was that of Private Jacob Linhard of the 9th Infantry in February of 1859. The last burial was that of Private William Coleman of the 14th Cavalry in June of 1906. In 1889, 51 headstones were placed in the cemetery as soldiers were reinterred from various small army posts in Washington and Idaho that closed during the next several years. This included 80 from Fort Lapwai in 1890. When the Army transferred ownership of the entire Fort Walla Walla site to the Veterans Bureau in 1922, there were 141 identified grave sites. However, earlier Army records show over 150. In 1906, some of the graves were realigned for a more uniform appearance. Trees were planted, and eventually a wooden fence provided an enclosure. Currently, there are 103 identifiable graves of enlisted soldiers and 8 officers. In the southwest corner, there are headstones for 6 women, 16 children, 2 Indians, and several unknown individuals. We're still doing research on why this little headstone is right here in the middle. It belongs to a child. Normally, the children were buried in the back portion with the women who either worked at the fort or were married to soldiers at the fort, and there are some other children in the back, but she has actually 2 headstones. You can see this one looks like it's in government configuration, like it came from Quartermaster Corps, like the rest of them. And then there's this little one, this very obviously a private headstone, and it's also has her name on it, and you can see she was only 6 years old. So far we haven't been able to figure out which of these soldiers she belonged to. There's one other person buried in this cemetery who has 2 tombstones, and that is William Draper. All we currently have is a theory on Mr. Draper. You can see that he has a civilian headstone as well as a government issue. Here's his right here, but it doesn't have anything on it. We have found his name listed on a roster that he worked in the quartermaster area, kind of in like a finance clerk type thing. And then we have another one here that has his name on it. That's also a civilian stone, a very nice one, which now needs to be repaired. We believe that he served in the Army for a while, got out, and then came back as a civilian and worked pretty much in the same capacity. That was not a real common thing in those days, but it did happen, so that may account for why he's got 2. Some members of the local chapter of Reserve Organization of America are conducting research about the cemetery and its occupants. Grants are being pursued by ROA for projects that will enhance the appearance of and provide an educational element to this National Historic Cemetery. These white marble tombstones we think were all made shortly after the Civil War, which means that the original graves were marked with wooden crosses, which would account for the variance in the numbers of graves depending on which record you're looking at. This one right here, Sergeant Hugh Graz from Company C, 14th U.S. Cavalry, that has more information on it than most of them. You can see the one right next to him, Company A, 4th Cav. That's it. Doesn't even give his rank, doesn't tell where he's from, like you will see on a little bit more modern tombstones, but they made so many so fast that they just put the basic information on them and shipped them out to these different fort cemeteries so that they could mark these graves. In addition to the individual white Georgia marble headstones, there are 3 monuments. One lists all the enlisted soldiers of 1st Cavalry killed in the Battle of Whitebird Canyon on June 17, 1877. Another lists enlisted men from the same unit who were killed 2.5 weeks later in the Battle of Cottonwood Canyon on July 3, 1877. The third is an obelisk commissioned by the survivors of Companies F and H at the Battle of Whitebird Canyon. These are, it says in the middle, I think 13 something, between these 2 stones, 13 U.S. soldiers. ROA is still doing some research into that. We believe that they are remains of men who were killed at these other 2 battles. And because it took so long to be able to safely send a rescue party back to the battle site, that they were unknown remains, but we knew that they belonged to soldiers, so they just put them in one container and brought them here. So it's like a small mass grave. This monument area is dedicated to the 146th Field Artillery Unit that fought in World War I. Like I said, they trained on the grounds of the old Fort Walla Walla shortly after it was officially decommissioned and then reopened so that they could train soldiers there. The cannons, the two cannons that you see, actually were with them in World War I, and they were brought back here to the States to be put on display, and each one of them has a name. It was named after an officer's wife. I know that one of them is named Pansy, but I can't remember which one, and her husband's name was Ezra Post. We have some information about him in the Fort Walla Walla Library. And the other piece that's in the back is a caisson for hauling various things. The reason we have a French flag, if you think about it, it's kind of obvious because the 146th Field Artillery was stationed in France. So we fly the French flag as well as our own. You can see, according to regulation, ours is slightly higher and to the right. A small group of people did fundraising like we did for the World War II monument. This was all done by volunteer money and volunteer labor to put this up. This obviously is the World War II memorial. It has the names of the 93 men from this county who perished during the war. And the star, the bronze star in the middle, represents the Gold Star families. And on the front of this piece right here, we have the emblems for each of the services that are represented. We have men from the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, and the Army Air Corps. This is the Vietnam Memorial. This was built, again, by fundraised and built by volunteers and dedicated in 1987. It has the names of the known people from the Walla Walla area who died in the Vietnam War.
All right, we're back.
Okay.
Thank you for that tour of the cemetery, Sherilyn. I know that
Yes.
guests always have questions about the cemetery and who is interred there. And, you know, we do have the list of names of those interred, but seeing a walkthrough kind of brings it all together and makes it a lot more meaningful. So thank you for taking us on that tour. We're going to open up the Q&A now to our attendees. Feel free to use the Q&A box or the chat function. So yeah, we can answer some questions now. One of the questions, why did they choose Fort Walla Walla of all places to re-inter soldiers from closed forts?
Because at the time, it was a relatively large installation. This was the third site of a military installation that was named Fort Walla Walla. The first two were quite small. One was up near Russell Creek at about 6 miles east of town. The second one was where our city center is right now. And this one is a little bit to the southwest of the town of time, and covered about a square mile. So it was fairly large. So it was a functioning, a very vibrant fort at the time. There was a lot going on. The Mullen Road, which some of our viewers probably know something about, actually started here, the Mullen Expedition. It was a jumping off place for a lot of things. So it just made sense as these smaller Army posts began to shut down, then they needed some place to make sure that their soldiers didn't just disappear, even though the fort was disassembled. So this was the likely place.
Okay, and another question, who is currently responsible for the upkeep of the cemetery?
It's on city grounds. The whole area that you saw on the video is under the direction of the Parks Department for the city of Walla Walla.
And do you know what the timeline is for the grant projects that are taking place to try to fix up the cemetery? Do you have any information about what they plan on doing to change the cemetery?
I do know that I'm pretty sure that we have the missing pieces to the fence. I know Groover did an excellent job of photographing the cemetery so that it's not quite as noticeable, but we're missing a lot because of trees that have fallen over and some other accidental type things over the years. I believe that the city has the pieces to that, but like everything else, it got stopped in the early spring, so they weren't able to do that. As far as the other enhancement projects, educational type things, ROA is working hand in glove with Mr. Wes Walker. He's in charge of this cemetery as well as Mountain View Cemetery and some of the other areas within the Parks Department. So he's our point of contact, and we were meeting with him on a regular basis to coordinate some of our ideas with what the city would be able to help us with. So right now, everything is just in the talking stage. One of our members has been working on some grant exploration. So when things do clear up, then hopefully we will be able to go ahead and do that. We don't want to be in competition with anything that would interfere with the city's progress that they've been making, because it's my understanding that they have actually had the initial grant extended that enabled them last year to replace the first complete row of the World War I veterans in the Mountain View Cemetery. So that grant has been extended. So that gives them a lot more working room. And Wes said that they learned a lot of things about that first time around, as you would with any other big project. And he said he was very relieved when they got the word that they were going to extend that grant because of the wonderful work they did. Lessons learned, they're going to be able to make much more headway. We'll be able to replace, within the same amount of money, they'll be able to replace a lot more headstones and move that forward. So it's all still on paper, all still talking, but there's lots of stuff going on. We haven't been just sitting around waiting for the calendar pages to flip. We've been working on stuff.
Well, that's exciting. Let's see. where would the records be regarding the burials at the Fort Walla Walla Cemetery, and could anybody research that information?
That's a real good question, and we keep running into problems. The two men that are currently doing the research just on the Fort Walla Walla Cemetery have come up. They've just about run out of ideas because the city doesn't seem to be able to lay their hands on anything. The VA bought the largest portion of the old fort site. They don't have anything because the portion that they bought to build the medical center on does not include the cemetery. So that doesn't work. And because those burials represent soldiers that happened so very long ago, there's not a lot of archival information out there. So the gentlemen in the ROA that have been trying to research now the individual soldiers as well as general information about the cemetery have just run into one stone wall after another, but they're still exploring some ideas. Like was mentioned before, and you saw it on the video, there are a couple of pages in a book that's available in the museum gift shop that was written by the museum's director, and I believe the previous curator co-authored that, and it's just about Fort Walla Walla. So it's got as much information as, not as much as exists, but it's got the major portion of it all in one place. So it's got the roster there, out who the commanders were, and has a nice timeline and some excellent photographs.
Yeah, I have a copy. That's well, it's backwards.
That's the one. Yes.
Yeah. So that is available at the museum store with some information about the Fort Cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess you wouldn't necessarily have any information about the women and children who were buried there, how many or who?
No, that will be the most part of the research. We can't attach names to names for very many of those. And then we found it very, very frustrating when there are marble headstones that just say unknown.
Oh yeah.
That's the clue. That's all that there is. And we haven't even delved into the problem of why were there over 150 names on a burial, on an interment roster at one time. And then another one says about 140, and now barely over 100. Where are those other guys? And why does the fence enclose such a large piece of property when the graves that we can identify with the white headstones only cover about half of that? So, there's another project that needs to be delved into.
A very interesting question. So I have someone here who missed the data on the World War II men and women who passed away.
Mm-hmm.
When they were talking about the monument. Would you like to talk about your involvement with the World War II Memorial Project and recognizing those names?
When we weren't original members to the committee that was doing the fundraising, we kind of got in a little bit later on it. I think they'd already been working for about a year and a half when we joined up. But the decision had already been made that this would be a fairly substantial monument, probably one of the larger ones, which it turned out to be larger than any of the other monuments to the military history here in this area. They wanted to honor all of the people who served because it does cover a big piece of our history and a massive number of people. If you think about, I figured it out one time, but I can't remember what the percentage is, based on the population of Walla Walla County during the years of World War II. If you figure out what percentage of those represents the roughly 3,800 men and women who went into uniform, and that's not even counting the Red Cross and the other auxiliary outfits that participated directly in the war effort. That's a huge number. for an area like this. So they wanted something that would honor all of those people, but they wanted to draw special attention to the men who perished during the war. So that would be basically from Pearl Harbor Day, December 7th, 1941, until the end of 1945. Now that goes a little bit past the surrender of the Japanese Empire and the signing of the surrender documents. So that's a big span right there. We had, at the time we dedicated this monument 2 years ago, we had 91 names already engraved on the monument, and running true to course, it was mentioned at a meeting, well, what happens if you find somebody else? And I said, well, they always say it's not cast in stone. Well, these names are cast in stone, but there's room. And we have, in the meantime, since the dedication, we have put 2 more names on there. So there's now 93.
Oh, wow.
Qualification or parameters for that, I guess you might say, would be if the soldier established residence in Walla Walla County at some time prior to his deployment. So in other words, we have some of these men were born in other places and their family moved here, but they lived here for a while, and then they enlisted, and then they were sent overseas and unfortunately did not come back. So somewhere between the time or up until the time that they were deployed with their unit, if we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they actually were residents of Walla Walla County, then we can also substantiate that they died before December 31st, 1945. Their names go on the wall. And that was the portion that I researched, was the biographical part of it. And then my husband, Neil, researched the background part to the unit that they were in and what was going on at the time that this soldier was killed in battle. Where was that unit? What was happening? What skirmish? What campaign? That type of thing. So we have the biographical piece that's set into a background against the military portion of it. So that's how that all came together. And we decided on our own to do that. It had been suggested in the committee that possibly down the road, maybe something should be written about these. So we took that and went, yeah, because that's something that we both enjoy doing, is research. We both enjoy military history. We're both veterans. So it was a logical fit.
So how did you find those last 2 names that you added? Where did the names come from?
They were ones that I actually had in an inactive file. In the process of, for lack of a better word, qualifying these men for the roster of names that would go on the monument, I had to take out some of them because they really weren't Walla Walla residents. So I kept them in a file. And we came across, I believe it was when one of our editors went to Penrose Library down toward the end of the whole process, because we had some of the biographical stories still had awfully big holes in them. We just had so little about. So Kathy Stritzel went down to Penrose Library and spent days down there going through the microfilm, all the old Walla Walla newspapers, page by page, looking in those dates between 41 and 45 for any article about any of the men. And she came across these other 2 names. I gave her both. She had the names of the men we already knew were going to be on the monument, and then she had the inactive names. And then she had worked with me so much on this, so she knew what to look for in an article. And she came across these 2 during that sweep. And then I did some more research on it, and there they were. We found the missing piece, and it was that newspaper article from the Walla Walla Union Bulletin that did it. So we were able to pull them together.
That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So this was all research that you were doing for the book that you guys were working on. Do you want to
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that publication?
It is, I just received the proof copy. It's not as big as it looks. It's a 6x9. It's kind of a standard size. Greg Lehman, who was a photographer for the Union Bulletin, took that beautiful cover photo for us. And it's got some photographs there again from Kathy's great research. She was able to, while she was looking for these articles, she found, I can find one in here as an example. She found a picture with almost each article. So that really increased our chances of being able to put more photographs in here. So those are all section in the front of the book. Up until she found all these extra articles, I had very few photos of these guys. I thought that I would be able to find like their official military photo somewhere on one of these websites. I did not.
Nothing.
So these all came from family sources, and they came from the newspaper sources. And we had quite a number of families that contacted us as they saw articles being put in the paper by Andy Porter throughout the process. While we were doing the book, while we were working on it, Andy would periodically put something in the paper about it. And invariably, somebody would come out of the woodwork and contact him and say, hey, my uncle or my brother-in-law or my something. And he would pass on the information to us. We would contact them. And people showed us remarkable things from their own family archives. One lady had scrapbooks that she had kept, and some of the individuals had letters, and some just had, they could just remember stories about it. I interviewed one lady who was a sister of one of these men that had been lost. And so she had, and you can't get better than that. That's in the research parlance, that's known as a primary source, and those are beyond valuable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty incredible. So how long were you working on this research project?
About 2.5 years. Yeah.
And these are just the stories of those who died in World War II?
Yes, these represent the names that are on the monument.
Okay.
Right.
And where is your book available if people are
As soon as I get the shipment, this will be the last, one of the last steps I have to cover with the publisher is I need to go on to their website and tell them how many copies of this book, now that we've had one physically to look at and make sure it's exactly the way that we wanted it. And it's very well done. They did a beautiful job putting this together. I'm very pleased with it. So all we have to do now is tell them how many copies we would like of it. They will ship it. And then each member of the families who have contacted us and provided us with information, each one of them will get a complimentary copy from us. And we're going to donate one to each middle school and high school in the county if they want one for their library. And the people that have helped us with the book, we actually had two editors. Kathy was one of them. She edited a lot of stuff and really helped move that forward. And then we have a retired lieutenant colonel from the Marine Corps who we worked with on the committee to build the monument. He took a look at all the chapters on the Pacific Theater. And then he gave us some good feedback on it. So individuals like that who've helped us throughout the process, they will get a complimentary copy. The rest of them will be sold only through the Fort Walla Walla Museum gift shop. We haven't set the price for it yet, but they will be available. So we'll let the powers that be know when everything is ready to go. And when the little stickers are on the back of them, then we'll put that on the website and people can come in on the weekends, enjoy the beautiful museum and pick up a brand new book.
All right. Well, that's something to look forward to. It sounds like it's wonderfully researched, and having those photos of the names, I mean, that's just fantastic. That
Yeah,
really is a
it's very
wonderful
valuable.
resource to preserve. So yeah, we'll definitely get the word out once that book is available. Is there anything else that you wanted to share about the Fort Cemetery or any of the other memorials?
Only if somebody wants to volunteer to help me weed around the memorial next spring.
Yeah,
I've taken on some of those extra things.
do you have regularly scheduled cemetery cleanups, or is that just maybe
No.
once every
No, it's
so often?
just when I can fit it in. I've definitely tried to get it first thing in the spring to clean up the area around, do a little pruning and whatnot. And then definitely get it all spiffed up, ready for Memorial Day, because I go put flags out on each of the military graves in the Fort Cemetery for Memorial Day. And of course, I want the Vietnam Memorial to look really good too. And I have a set of wreaths that I put out in various places to honor our military. So there's always something to do. And I don't know if this will show up or not, but if somebody thinks of something, let's try this and see if it'll work. Yeah, if somebody thinks of something later, another question, can you see that?
Here, let me.
Got my email on it. Did that come through?
I've sent it to the panelist list. So that's Sherilyn's email if you have information to share.
Yeah.
Or you can email the museum and we can be in touch with her also. Yeah,
if you think of something later you want to ask, go ahead. And the reason that we did that particular tour, this was Groover's, one of his many swell ideas that he has, because the docents get asked frequently as we're taking them through the Pioneer Village, are we going to go get to see the cemetery? And no, because it's not part of the museum per se, but it's right there. So because of frequent questions about that, and it is kind of unique and it's so well maintained. The city does an excellent job of keeping everything watered and weeded and whatnot. So it looks really good. So we thought this would be kind of a nice thing to do, to add on. And then as usual, well, while we're in the neighborhood, let's go look at the World War I, the Vietnam and World War II. So one thing just kind of grew into another. So we're happy to share that with people, give them a little bit of information.
Yeah, I know everybody is always asking about the cemetery. And so we appreciate any resources about, you know, who is there and what people can look for if they're taking a walk. I mean, that cemetery is open for people to go and visit at any point. Mm-hmm. It's not under the same open hours as the museum.
Right.
And we had a question about the gift shop, whether the gift shop is open at Fort Walla Walla Museum. And the museum is currently open on a limited schedule from Friday to Sunday, 12 to 5 p.m. And the book is not yet available in our bookshop, but we will definitely let everybody know when that is in stock.
Very soon.
Yeah, soon. Yep. All right, well, this was a little bit of a shorter after hours presentation since we're missing the Weston portion. But Sherilyn, I wanted to thank you for taking the time.
Oh, you're welcome.
Take us on that tour, and also to be available here for the Q&A. I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to thank our Museum After Hours sponsors, Humanities Washington CARES Grant and Pacific Power Foundation for supporting this month of Museum After Hours. And to everybody who joined in virtually, for those of you who came late, we're going to be sending out a link to all the participants to your email that you used to register. And we're going to have a link to the location where this video is going to be, the recording is going to be housed, so you can watch it. It'll take us a few days to upload it with the Q&A attached, but it will be available on our website along with a brief questionnaire, which really helps us out if you have a minute or two just to let us know how you're finding out about our programs so that we can better tailor them to the people who are watching. So also our next program is Thursday, November 19th. It's the week before the last Thursday. And it is featuring the Women's Air Force Service Pilots. And that's going to be Rebecca Holm, 5 p.m. Pacific time, and details can be found on our website, fwwm.org. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Sherilyn, and have a great night.
Okay, you too. Bye.